On February 1st, government representatives and corporate executives from around the world returned home from the World Economic Forum. The summit took place in the ski resort town of Davos, Switzerland. The Associated Press reported that the world's foremost gathering of the best and brightest in government and business failed to come up with any new plan to stem, much less reverse, the global financial meltdown. Meanwhile, the consequences of that meltdown for the leader's constituents back home continue to mount. As economists in the U.S. warn against the potential for double-digit unemployment, much of the world is already experiencing that reality. In Spain, 200,000 workers lost their jobs in January alone, the most for a single month on record, pushing that country's unemployment rate to over 14%. Over 9% of workers in the Republic of Ireland are now jobless, representing more unemployed people than at any time since the Irish began keeping record in 1967. Over 2 million workers in Colombia now find themselves without jobs, representing over 10% of the workforce. Meanwhile, in China, the New York Times reports that 20 million rural migrant workers have lost their jobs. Migrant workers make up a major part of the globalized economy, and they will be impacted severely, says Joseph Chamie of Pakistan's The Daily Times. The global economic crisis, which is hitting the developed countries hard, might generate a tsunami-like wave of migrants returning home. He explains that a drop in remittances from employees sending their earnings home to their families will cause living conditions in many countries to worsen. In Russia, even those who still have their jobs are finding their salaries less and less valuable as the ruble fell to an 11-year low. Russia, which depends on energy for 80% of its export revenue, was counting on $95 a barrel oil for its 2009 budget, and will have to adjust to the $40 reality we see today. In what was labeled as the first political casualty of the crisis, Iceland's entire ruling administration resigned under the pressure of massive anti-government protest. The demonstrations were sparked when Prime Minister Geir Hart accepted a $10 billion rescue package from the International Monetary Fund. The protests in Iceland are part of an anti-government response to the financial crisis that has been observed in streets all around the world. In France last week, an estimated 2.5 million people hit the streets to protest President Sarkozy's $33 billion stimulus plan. Many there are demanding the government nationalize the banking system. Similar protests took place in Italy in October, when hundreds of thousands protested Prime Minister Berlusconi's cuts to the education budget. In December, Greece was overcome with an anti-government uprising, and just last week, thousands blockaded the streets of Mexico City in anger at President Felipe Calderón's neoliberal economic policies. Meanwhile, back at the World Economic Forum, the annual demonstration that has accompanied the meeting since its inception was cracked down on heavily by Swiss authorities this year. An article on InfoShop News said that 130 protesters had been arrested. Reuters reported that the protesters were demonstrating against the World Economic Forum, saying the elite gathered for its annual meeting are not qualified to fix the world's problems.
Donate today and receive a new documentary film available to members of the Real News Network. The History of the National Security State with legendary author Gore Vidal. Bonus features of the DVD include an in-depth response to Vidal from ex-CIA analyst Ray McGovern, who served under 7 U.S. presidents, an exclusive interview with Colin Powell's former Chief of Staff Larry Wilkerson, and an insightful interview with oil policy analyst Antonia Juhas.
The news magazine of the screen. Living glimpses of history in the making.
Hollywood and Washington, there's a symbiotic relationship. They both deal with illusions. Reality doesn't often play much of a part. I think I saw through a myth of the Cold War almost from the beginning. I was a Washington political kid from a political family. Roosevelt first had radio because he had this great speaking voice and everyone liked to hear. Truman proceeded to break every arrangement that Roosevelt had set up for a peaceful coexistence. And Truman thought that it would be a good idea. Why not just stay armed all the time? And then he devised the national security state. You've got to go up and swear allegiance to the United States or else you're a commie. I mean, we had imported fascism. We get Dwight Eisenhower. who said that we have this great military industrial complex. It is a dangerous thing. And he said this is going to change everything. And the way our country's governed is going to change us politically. Along comes Jack Kennedy, who wanted to make his mark, believed in the Cold War. But he said, in this kind of politics, it is the appearance of things that matters. I think everybody should take a sober look at the world about us. The national security state still exists, only it isn't communism anymore, it's terrorism. This is the most serious thing that has happened in the history of the United States. Knowledge is power. We need an honest news system.
We need the real news.
This is the sort of thing we can build right now without anyone else's permission from the government or from the business community. It's the power's in our hands.
If we're not going to sleepwalk into more wars, we think we need to start with a television news network that won't bow to pressure and has the courage to seek facts. And that means independent economics. And that's why we need you.
Make a tax-deductible donation now of at least $10 a month or a one-time give of at least $75. As a thank you for your support, we will send you the new documentary film, The History of the National Security State.